So today, obviously, we're talking about selfie culture. All right, there's Dave. There's Dave. Dave always loves a good cred. So today we're talking about selfie culture and selfies and what is a selfie. You know, what does that mean? What is selfie culture? And it's actually a really contested concept. Also, Dave really loves Snapchat, so everything is kind of Snapchat themed throughout the slides, from the Bitmojis to the snap codes, even the font. That's the Snapchat font, by the way, if you're interested. It's not like an official font, it's just that's the font they use. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to cover here everything you need to know about selfie culture. All right, so the biggest question really is, what is a selfie? Like, it's important to define our terms, and a big part of like what is a selfie is that it's a really contested concept. Everybody's got kind of like a different idea of what a selfie is, and what is a selfie as opposed to a self-portrait. And for us, you know, I mean, you could look to the Oxford Dictionary, which is obviously, you know, this kind of the holy written source of everything in regards to the English language, and they say it's a photographic self-portrait, you know, one taken by a smartphone or a webcam, and then shared online. And that's a very good like technical definition of how to take a selfie, but it doesn't really tell you what a selfie like is, and there's a little bit more kind of like metaphysical meat to it than that. And the second definition, which came from the lecture, I don't remember who said it though, I wasn't able to write that down really fast, I apologize, but if you refer to your lecture notes or those lecture slides, it should be there. And that was that a photographic object that initiates the transmission of a human feeling in the form of a relationship between a whole bunch of people. That definition on its own doesn't really work either, again, because it lacks the technicality. So I feel that the two together kind of provide this really nice, sort of definition of what a selfie is. It's not all-encompassing. I wouldn't say it's 100%. And of course, you all might feel differently, and that's okay too, because it's a contested concept. We haven't really nailed down what a selfie is yet. This is just what we think it is. This is just two idiots' opinions. So yeah, like, I mean, that's just something you guys might be able to come up with. But I really believe that if we are going to come up with a definition of selfie in the future and lock it down and go, okay, we need to like sort this out, I think it has to encompass both the technical aspect of the internet and smartphones and webcams and everything, and that, you know, that social aspect of that, you know, it conveys meaning. It has these affordances. It has these kinds of rules and traditions surrounding the selfie.
So moving forward, we're going to tackle, well, we'd like to build a foundation for what's the progression from a self-portrait to what we understand the selfie to be today. So looking here, dating way back to French wall paintings, you can see that we have the handprint. Someone has put their own hand down and then brushed dust over that. That is their own hand that they are self-portraying across those rock paintings, potentially telling a story, connecting other things, or as an image to just showcase other people that they were there, that is their hand. If we're building on our idea of the selfie, the self-portrait, about the person personifying themselves in the area of an object, presenting an object, then this is probably one of the most first early dated examples of such. And then we can move to more attempts at realism, as showing an actual person within an actual setting and then curated by themselves to something that we can more prove to be a self-portrait and like physically represented to what we have here with the Rembrandt.
Yep, Rembrandt.
Yep. Rembrandt's famous oil painting of himself.
Yeah, this isn't the earliest example of an oil painting self-portrait, nor is it maybe the best. I'm just a huge fan of Rembrandt personally. I love his landscapes, and so when I found a Rembrandt self-portrait, I couldn't help myself. This is just me being a fanboy. I apologize.
But it still perfectly illustrates what we're trying to get across. That it's the self-portrait. It's putting yourself as the subject within the environment and showcasing that you are there. To what we see the selfie as today, where with the technological advances that we've all made thus far, the selfie is as simple as just a photograph of yourself in an environment. But at the same time, it is so much more than just a photograph of yourself. So then, now we've established the kind of history that the selfie has taken, we can now ask ourselves, you know, just kind of like, what is the selfie? Like, as John discussed before with the definitions, there's so many varying definitions. But I think the one we're going to try and focus on is it's a self-portrait, but, right, it is so much more. It has so much more metaphysical properties to it, so much more constraints, so much more connotations, that a selfie just isn't as simple anymore as you are the person in that environment, where at the same time it is. So we look at what we see today in selfie culture is what we are just kind of like taught to believe kind of thing. So it's a lot of westernized approach to selfies. We see the Kim Kardashians, the Kylie Jenners posting selfies, and they're very luxurious. They're very Hollywood-esque in their kind of approach. They're very much like this, right? Where that you are the person that you are wanting to be seen, right? It is about you. It can potentially be very narcissistic, or on a first look value, it can be assessed as narcissistic. And then what I want to propose is that there are so many different cultures around the world that the selfie has so many different meanings to different countries that you visit, where we are very exposed to the westernized understanding of a selfie, where it's about the person. If we were to look and take it a step further and maybe look at a more marginalized aspect of the selfie, something out in the third world countries, their idea of a selfie is much different to the ones that we have. Based on one of the notes from the readings, let me just bring it up really quickly, they talked about how in the third world, or out in the more less developed countries, a selfie is a used form of communication to another, as a way of letting your family know that you are safe, or as a way of building interpersonal connections. It's much more than just being, this is me in this spot. It's, this is me, this is what is happening behind me. And this is why it's happening. And this is to show you that I am okay. The David Noma and Geo Freeman found that selfies out in the third world are to speak about violence in their area, to self-document their lives, and to let their parents know that they are safe during the day. Which just further highlights that there's such a cultural difference between the Hollywood-esque westernized aspect of the selfie, what we are doing today, where it's very much about us, as opposed to what they're doing in the third world, which is more encapsulates their environment, that this is what it is. It's a way of free speech, it's a way of communicating, a way of making sure that we are fine. Which brings us to our analysis of the Selfie City.
Yep. There you go. You wanna
me to do that?
Yeah, you wanna run camera because I need to access the notes. Okay, bear with me for a second while I bring up my notes on Selfie City. Okay, here they are. Okay, so Selfie City, I mean, you might have heard me talk about it yesterday in the lecture where I said that I think the Selfie City website is a lot of hoopla and hokum. Big part of it, so first of all, what is Selfie City? Selfie City was an attempt at researching what selfies are. And they did this by getting a bunch of pulling a bunch of images off of Instagram from 5 different major cities. That was Bangkok, Sao Paulo, New York, Moscow, and I can't remember the 5th city.
Did you say New York?
Yeah, it's Bangkok, New York, Sao Paulo, Moscow, and I can't remember the 5th city off the top of my head.
The main idea of it is that they were very 5 metropolitan-based hubs of the world.
And that's the important part about the 5 metropolitan hubs. So they pulled it from the centre of those cities, so from like the central business districts, the very busy areas, where which makes sense because you're most likely to probably get people who take selfies simply because the population densities. Because you've got more people, there are more people with phones, odds are you're going to have more people with selfies, there will be more selfies for you to research. What I don't like, and then they took this and they analysed it about 50 different ways, and they were like, what's the ratio of men to women who take selfies? At what head angle do they take the selfies? What age are these people who take selfies? All these kind of different ways of analysing the research and presenting that research. The problem for me comes right down to an absolute core issue, which is key to all forms of social research, and that is having a statistically significant sample size. So people think, when you think of a statistically significant sample size, people think, oh, well then you've got to, you can't know everything about a city based on, 5,000 people. You've got to survey the entire city. And yeah, you could do that. You could survey the entire city, and yeah, you would have a 100% accurate result. But science doesn't work with 100% accuracy, right? Science gets us to 98, 99%, and we're pretty confident that this is going to happen. And the same applies in social research. So for a statistically significant sample size, you want at least maybe 3,000 to 4,000 samples of whatever it is you're studying in social research. And that gives you about a 98 or 99% margin of probability with only a 1 to 2% margin of error. To go from 98 or 99 to 99.9%, you then need to go from say 3,000 to 4,000 to 100,000 to 1 million. So it becomes sort of a game of diminishing returns at that point. It becomes almost impossible to do any form of research to get to that extreme level of accuracy or perfect accuracy. And if they'd have used a sample size that large, I wouldn't have had a problem. And the way that the website lies is that they say, oh, we got 640,000 Instagram photos. You go, oh, wow, 640,000, yeah, that's significant. No. Of that 640,000, 3,500 were actually selfies. Oh, okay. So 3,500. Yeah, that's significantly significant. You get something from that. Yeah, but we divided them up amongst all the cities, and from those we only have 640 each. So to analyze a city and to tell me what the age rate, what people are doing with selfies in Moscow, you're telling me you got all that from 640 people? Well, that's not statistically significant. That doesn't tell us anything about how people take selfies in Moscow. And that's the core problem I have with the website. On top of all of this, they are overgeneralizing selfies based on a very small source of sampling. So they pulled all these images off of Instagram, which Instagram, great place, people post a lot of selfies there, yes, but posting a selfie on Instagram is not indicative of selfies in general. People post selfies to Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Pinterest and WeChat, all kinds of social networks. There's thousands of them now. People post selfies everywhere. People print them out and put them up on the wall. Like, you can't say that Instagram is the be-all end-all of selfies and that will tell you exactly what a selfie is. Especially when you get into, say, age ranges. So Instagram tends to skew younger in their user base, which means that how can that be indicative of people who take selfies in the older age range? How can that be indicative of, say, people who are middle-aged, or people, in the third world, or even people who don't have, decent internet access, or people who just don't use Instagram. Like, I'm not a big fan of Instagram. I have it, and I used it for a little while, but I just found it was too much effort to maintain, and I wasn't getting much out of it. So now I just use Facebook and Twitter, and that's more or less it. And then I have Snapchat because David snaps like 50,000 times a day, so it's a really great way of keeping up with him. I just don't use Instagram, but I still take selfies. I take pictures of myself, I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I don't put them up on Instagram. So what we can say, if they had a statistically significant sample size, we could say this is what people do when they take selfies on Instagram. And that would have been okay, but they didn't. They overgeneralized it, and I really didn't like that. Now, what else was there what I wanted to say? Oh, right, okay, so how I came to this conclusion. So I had a little bit of help with this. I had a little help because my father is a social researcher. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. He's done social research. He was working towards a master's degree, and he was doing social research for that. He's been published in books. His name's McLeish. He sat down with me for 2 hours, and literally, he looked through the website and then just gave me this entire rant and said, here's everything wrong with this website. Write it all down. I sat there for the next 2 hours. I was hungry. It was dinner time. I wrote the whole thing down. I have a quote here from him. Where is it? Did you? Oh, you did. Okay, so his quote, whilst in aggregate, the results are possibly statistically significant. So what he means is that if you put all 5 cities together, you might get something. The results per city are not as 640 as too small is too small a number. So yeah, that was his comment. It's too small, there's not enough people. And that's the problem I have with selfie cities. So as far as like research into this area, more study is definitely required. And this is a fantastic sort of jumping off point. You can go, okay, here's how we might be able to do it. Here's how we might be able to do this research. But now we need to sit down and really do the research.
So just to touch on a little further with returns to bring it back to the cultural aspect of selfies, the site aimed to establish an understanding of what the selfie is, but what it actually kind of did was establish this is what power and privilege looks like in selfies. Just on their sample size alone, based on the fact that they took samples from 5 metropolitan city hubs like that, it leaves out a huge cultural misunderstanding of selfies, as different countries with different circumstances produce different selfies with far different connotations.
And even people within the same country have different understandings of selfies based on who's in the city, who's in the country, so on and so forth.
So just inherently of what Selfie City tried to establish in the broader term of what a selfie is, just regards to that, the fact that there are so many different cultures of selfies, in that alone that it wasn't able to achieve that. Real quickly, we'll touch on furthering on, like, we've established the many cultures of selfies. And given that, and now that we know that, we can look at a little bit further of selfie gaze and just kind of like the meaning and the connotation of that, whether it was right or wrong. And we're going to beg the question of when is it appropriate to take a selfie? So to anyone who doesn't know what Selfiegate is, I think it was the Danish PM.
The Danish Prime Minister.
The Danish Prime Minister took a selfie, as you can see, with Barack Obama and David Cameron, the American and the British
Prime Ministers.
Leaders themselves, at Nelson Mandela's memorial service. As you can see, it's kind of like a joyous snap in what we mostly consider kind of like a grave time. And this circulated across the internet and ultimately begged the question of, when is it right to take a selfie? And then subsequently from that, it also sparked a lot of gender outrage of just, if this was a man taking a selfie with a woman, if it would be a little bit different, all that kind of stuff. But the main stuff that we're trying to focus on here is the culture around the selfie itself, but furthering in the sense that, okay, we all used to taking the photo like this and in various different places, but are there certain places that we shouldn't be doing this? Are the selfies not confined to that? Does it determine on what the person's actual intent with the selfie might be? Surely they're not there to harm or disgrace Nelson Mandela's name in that way, but they're clearly taking a photo at his memorial service. That is them there. That is what the selfie is achieving. No matter what it is trying to do or what they're trying to say, that they are proving to themselves that they are there with them at Nelson Mandela's memorial service. But yeah, I just thought I'd touch on that as a further of what the culture is. You know, there's so many different cultures of selfies. It isn't so like easily ingrained to just say it is just one thing, but so many different people take different photos for different reasons that something like this can be looked at negatively, and it might be even looked at positively, depending on how you look at it. Moving on.
Alright, you want to take that again?
Alright, so the big important question then, why the hell does any of this matter? Like, why is this important? Why do we care? You know, people take selfies, so what? It's not going to change the world. You know, I mean, it's not like we're all anti-wieners where we're taking photos of our wieners and posting them on Twitter, so, like, who cares? Well, it's important for a bunch of different reasons, and one of them is that, yeah, we are doing this. We are taking selfies, and we are posting them on the internet. Even if it's not in the literal you are sense, there are, you know, it'll be your friends or people you know or people in your community, and you may or may not end up in these selfies, or you might be taking them yourself, or, you know, say with David, he does a lot of group selfies, and I end up in those, and things like that. And so selfies are all around us. People take them everywhere, people post them everywhere. So it's important that we look at it just from that perspective alone. Specifically to the Australian perspective, I think a lot of it has to do with, say, privacy. So as far as like Australian privacy laws, we're pretty loose and lax with a lot of this kind of stuff. But in America, things are very different. And America is kind of what you need to look at in regards to sort of like Australian selfies on the internet, because the majority of the social media websites that we use to post these images are based in America. They're on American servers, they're under American jurisdiction. So it's important to understand what their laws are in regards to these things in order to make sure that we're either doing the right thing and not getting in trouble, or that we're not getting kind of like, you know, treated as second-class citizens, because even though we use these services, we don't have any right to say how they're governed or determined or mandated or legislated on, because we're not citizens of the United States. Even though one might argue we are citizens of the internet, we are citizens of Facebook or Twitter or what have you. So, you know, it's important to kind of point out selfies and say, be aware of these things. Look into, say, the net neutrality laws. Look into net neutrality laws. Look into things like what the Edward Snowden leaks. Look into the Chelsea Manning leaks and things like that, and sort of see how the American conversation is going, because that may ultimately affect you and what you do online.
And this is our question slide. So
yeah,
just simple, yeah.
This is the question we want to ask you guys.
Yeah. Like, as we touched on with the history of the self-portrait and the selfie, we managed to just like loosely define the history and the fact that it started from such a simple hand painting. The object of the person is in that spot. So, and then now we can see it today where the self-portrait, the selfie, doesn't necessarily, or from what we've noticed, doesn't necessarily always encompass the face. It might encompass half the face, it might not even encompass the face at all. So the question that we want to pose is that when you're taking a selfie, or when you think of selfies, are you expecting to see the person's face? Does that, for you, identify that they are them in that spot? Or do they not at all? Is it as simple as just having your hand in the image to showcase that you were there? It's a big question.
It's a big question.
I wouldn't really like.
Oh!
You go first. I was just gonna say, like, I wouldn't really say, like, if I was taking a photo of my hand, like right now, if I was in this class, I wouldn't be like, that's a selfie. I don't know, like, that's personally for me. I feel like a selfie is like a person.
Yeah. Yep.
I was gonna say, face. It's not doesn't overly matter. Like I take a lot of snapshots and grab the emoji, put it over my face. Like I don't want to send a nice photo, just like or like I don't know. I feel it doesn't have to have your face in it, or even just like the chin down, like sneaky snapshot while you walk into class or something. You want to like make it obvious you're taking a snapshot.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. One of the examples that we came across was there was a huge social media frenzy over a woman who took a picture of herself in a bikini, and she had a colostomy bag. I can't remember what the condition was she had specifically, but she specifically had a colostomy bag as part of that, and she took a photo of herself in a bikini. And it was, the idea was that it was body positive. Like, it didn't matter that she had a colostomy bag, like, she was who she was, and she was as comfortable in her own skin, and that was fine. And the internet went nuts over it. Everybody freaked out about it. Now, I would have defined that as a selfie. You don't see her face. She kind of like takes the photo with the front-facing camera. She's lying down on one of those beach recliners, and you see the colostomy bag lying on her stomach, and she takes that photo. I would say that's a selfie because she's trying to convey a message of herself, but also herself in a specific place. And kind of the whole point of it was that people who have colostomy bags generally can't go and do certain things because they have certain attires that are expected to be worn, and that would reveal the bag, and it would reveal their shame or something like that. And she was like, well, I'm sick of it. That's not true. I'm a human being. I want to go to the beach. I want to lie out in the sun, and I'm going to do it. And if you don't like it, tough. So that was one of the examples of like selfies without a face that we found online. And I suppose the next question we kind of wanted to ask was...
With regards to consent of a selfie, so as we touched on before, there are many different forums that we can post selfies on, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. And with those forums, it's clear, right? When you post a photo, a lot of the time, or a lot of the hey, that photo is now in our possession. Along those kind of lines. So, in knowing that you're posting a selfie online and someone has grabbed it, just in terms of consent, where do you think that kind of ends in terms of like that person has grabbed your photo? I argue that they're allowed to, right? Because you've assigned yourself to say, Facebook, I'm allowed to put my photo here. What person 2 does is up to them. That there's no consent here, but there's consent there. What he does with that photo, then that's where I think the privacy comes into it, and then consent laws and all that kind of stuff. But until that point, the question I'm trying to pose to you is, just with regards to consent, is it too loose? Is it too loose there, the way Facebook handles the fact that you can screenshot it and there it is? Or you can save the photo so willy-nilly if you're on your computer, it's as simple as a right-click and save? Or do they need to adopt maybe what a Snapchat kind of does and informs you that this person has screenshotted your snap, that this has happened, now that you know that this has happened?
Well, I mean, personally, for me, I don't have a problem with it. But that's because of my attitudes towards the internet and big data and myself. So I see it as a trade. So in exchange for Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Google getting all of my information, and some of it even private, like Google reads my emails, and I know this because the trade-off is what I get in return is I get all of these wonderful services. I get the ability to talk to my friends, the ability to know where I am and how I can get to where I want to go. The thing with Google reading my emails is that I have an Android phone. Android comes with a thing called Google Now within the Google app, and it's like an assistant. It's kind of like Siri, but it doesn't talk. And a perfect example of this is when I was working, I get an email with my plane ticket. It says, hey, you're going to go to this place at this time, and it's all inside the email. And then Google Now posts a notification saying, hey, we saw you got a plane ticket, and we've checked the plane, and we know where the airport is, and we know where you are, so you need to leave your house or wherever at this time and take this train. You'll get there in plenty of time to go through airport security. The plane hasn't been delayed. We'll tell you that in real time. And, kind of, it's like a humongous convenience for me. But again, the trade-off being is that Google reads my emails. And so that's kind of a consent that I make for myself when I engage in social media with my information. And that includes selfies. And for me, it's sort of like, yeah, Facebook has a download button. And if people want to
download a picture of me and then crop my face out and put it on, a horse's body or something like that, well, that can happen because that's an affordance of Facebook, is that people can download your pictures or people can screenshot them on Instagram or whatever. But that's me. I'm a very open person. So. What about you? What do you all think? Do you have any thoughts on any of this? How do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about people maybe possibly downloading your photos and using them in ways you didn't intend?
My friends will see it, then it's kind of out of your control. Like if you didn't want anyone to do anything with your photos, you probably just wouldn't post any photos.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. It's good. That's a good point. Yeah. Anybody else? Does anybody else have any thoughts? Does everybody agree on that? Or yes?
You kind of add on to that.
Yeah.
If you're kind of giving the consent by posting a photo, because you already know in the first place that you're uploading this, people are going to see it.
Mm.
So in that sense, you're giving that consent. I don't know that.
So there's there's an implied consent there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
What about with people using Instagram and all those things as a form of art, and then consent with copying it or making money from your own creativity?
See, and that's a really good point. When we step away from selfies and we step into other forms of sort of consent with images we take online, you're right. And this leads into problems with, say, professional photographers who will post their images online and they want people to buy them, and then people don't. They just screenshot it, copy it, and paste it up. Even when you've got the big, Shutterstock watermarks or something, people will just put it up with the watermarks on. They don't care. And it's sort of well, the person worked hard, they took that photo, they sat down in Lightroom and they edited it and made sure it was all good, and they spent years teaching themselves how to take photographs to make sure they got the good photograph, and they deserve to get paid, and then they don't. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, what about that?
Just go on further with that. Yeah, you're 100% right, but then that moves into kind of where copyright law comes in terms of art. So if someone's taking your art and then deliberately just re-uploading it, I personally, we're not 100% certain on the law here, but personally, you assign the consent to Instagram or to Facebook or whatever, that's your photo, now it's their property. But that person, once they've taken that, it steps outside of Instagram as well. So in terms of suing Instagram, you couldn't necessarily do that because then it's up to them for the copyright law of the person who's actually taken it. Same thing with someone who's grabbed your photo online of you, who you are, and then used it as their own account, and then made another account with your identity. That in itself doesn't necessarily come under consent, and then it moves into kind of false identity, and then that's a whole other area of law that gets tackled at that point.
It's interesting that copyright is used a lot to control the way that your image is used, beyond.
It's 70% accurate. If you have an image that is 100% replicated by the other image, that's where copyright stems in. If you change it roughly 30%, where only 70% of it's recognised, that's where copyright law.
Well, it's not so much the proportion of the image as to the intent. So if you can show that you have actually made an artwork that you've transformed, transformative is the legal term in US law, then you can be protected by copyright. But I think we might leave it there. That was fantastic.
Yep, that's it.
Great.
That's everything.
Thank
Cool.
you very much.
Thank you. Dave, do you want to sign off?